My father always said honesty was his greatest virtue. But when he stood up at my sister's wedding, microphone in hand, his honesty was a weapon designed to destroy me in front of 300 people. 2 months later, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. The weapon had completely backfired. If you looked at a photograph of the Hayes family, you would see a picture of American aristocratic perfection. My father, Robert Hayes, was a silver-haired real estate tycoon who wore bespoke suits and a perpetual expression of mild disappointment. My sister, Beatrice, was 2 years older than me and a carbon copy of our late mother, tall, impossibly slender, with an Ivy League pedigree and a smile that belonged on a country club brochure. And then there was me, Cassia. I was the family's open wound. I didn't want to go to law school. I didn't want to join my father's firm. I had brown, untamable hair, dirt permanently wedged under my fingernails, and a business degree. I used to start a landscape architecture firm, specializing in ecological restoration. To my father, I was a glorified gardener, while Beatrice was securing her position as a junior partner at a corporate law firm and rubbing elbows with Manhattan's elite. I was in wading boots, trying to revive dying wetlands in upstate New York. Our dynamic had been set in stone since childhood. Beatrice was the investment. I was the tax write-off. I had long ago accepted my role as the black sheep, building a quiet, happy life away from my father's suffocating expectations. But familial duty has a strange gravitational pull, and when Beatrice announced her engagement to Liam Sterling, I was inevitably dragged back into the orbit of Robert Hayes. Liam was the heir to a massive private equity fortune. To my father, this wasn't a marriage. It was a corporate merger. The wedding was set to take place at the Sterling family's historic estate in Newport, Rhode Island. It was to be the social event of the season, a sprawling, 3-day affair that cost more than my entire company had grossed in its first 3 years. I was asked to be a bridesmaid. I knew it wasn't because Beatrice wanted me by her side. It was because excluding her only sister would look bad in the society pages. The weekend of the wedding, the tension was a physical weight in the air. From the moment I arrived at the estate, my father began his usual campaign of quiet belittlement. At the rehearsal dinner on Friday night, he caught me by the elbow as I was reaching for a glass of sparkling water. "Is that the dress you're wearing?" he asked, his eyes raking over my dark blue silk gown. It was expensive. I had saved up for it. But it wasn't designer. "Yes, Dad. It's what I brought." He sighed, that heavy, theatrical sigh he reserved only for me. "I offered to give you my credit card, Cassia. You didn't have to show up looking like you bought your outfit off a clearance rack in Albany. Liam's parents have the governor sitting at their table. Try not to slouch." I swallowed the lump of anger in my throat. "I look fine, Dad." "Fine is the enemy of exceptional," he muttered, turning his back to me to go greet a senator. I spent the rest of the evening making polite conversation with distant relatives who asked probing, thinly veiled questions about my little gardening hobby. The only saving grace was my best friend and business partner, Silas, who was texting me terrible dad jokes under the table to keep me from walking out into the ocean. I was already vulnerable. Just a year prior, I had gone through a devastating, deeply humiliating breakup. My ex-fiancé, David, had walked out on me 3 weeks before our wedding, taking a substantial portion of our joint savings with him. I had almost lost my business. In a moment of absolute desperation, 6 months ago, I had broken my own cardinal rule and asked my father for a short-term loan to make payroll. He had looked at me from across his mahogany desk, steepled his fingers, and said, "I don't throw good money after bad, Cassia." A successful woman would have seen the signs with David. A successful business owner wouldn't need a bailout. Consider this a lesson in accountability. I had left his office in tears, sold my car, took out a predatory bank loan, and worked 90-hour weeks to keep my company afloat. I had survived, but the sting of his refusal, the absolute lack of paternal care, had permanently fractured whatever was left of my heart. I hadn't spoken to him about my personal life since. I thought the worst part of the weekend would be enduring his coldness. I was entirely unprepared for his cruelty. Saturday arrived, bathed in golden sunlight and the suffocating scent of 10,000 imported white orchids. The ceremony was a blur of string quartets, designer tears, and whispered admiration. Beatrice looked like royalty. Liam looked incredibly smug. I stood at the altar, holding a heavy bouquet, pasting on a serene smile, while my feet throbbed in heels I wasn't used to wearing. By the time the reception began in the massive glass-walled pavilion erected on the estate's sprawling lawn, I was exhausted. There were 300 guests. The champagne flowed like water, and the volume of laughter and clinking crystal rose to a deafening roar. I sat at the head table, separated from my father by 3 aunts and an uncle. I picked at my seared scallops, praying for the moment the cake would be cut so I could quietly escape to my hotel room. Then the band stopped playing. A sharp clink, clink, clink echoed through the pavilion. My father stood at the center of the room, holding a microphone. The spotlight hit him, catching the silver in his hair. He looked magnificent. He looked powerful. Family, friends, distinguished guests, Robert began, his rich, baritone voice carrying effortlessly over the speakers. Tonight, we celebrate the union of 2 extraordinary families, but more importantly, we celebrate my daughter, Beatrice. A wave of applause washed over the room. Beatrice beamed from her seat next to Liam. When Beatrice was born, my father continued, pacing slowly, I knew she was destined for greatness. She has always possessed a rare combination of intellect, grace, and ambition. She is a partner at a top-tier law firm. She is fiercely intelligent. She is, without a doubt, the greatest achievement of my life. Watching her marry Liam, a man of equal stature and vision, is a father's ultimate dream. More applause. I clapped politely, looking down at my napkin. It was standard wedding fare. But, my father said, his voice dropping a fraction, taking on a conspiratorial tone. The crowd quieted, sensing a joke. Parenting is a game of averages, isn't it? A few chuckles rippled through the older men in the crowd. I felt a sudden, icy prickle at the back of my neck. You see, for every brilliant success, the universe demands a counterbalance. My father turned slowly, and the spotlight followed him until he was looking directly at my end of the table. Cassia, darling, stand up. My heart stopped. The blood rushed to my ears. No. Come on, don't be shy, he coaxed, a wide, genial smile on his face. The guests were laughing now, turning in their seats to look at me. My Aunt Carolyn gently nudged my elbow. Feeling utterly trapped, I slowly stood up. Look at her, folks, my father said. The microphone picked up the wet sound of him smacking his lips. My youngest. Now, Bia is a corporate litigator. Cassia plays in the dirt. She calls it ecological landscaping, but let's be honest, it's glorified weed pulling. Laughter erupted, loud, echoing laughter from 300 strangers. My face burned with absolute fire. I tried to force a good-natured smile, treating it as a roast, but my father wasn't done. We all have our paths, he continued, his tone turning mock-pitying. B chose the path of success. Cassia. Well, Cassia has always struggled with her choices. In fact, just a few months ago, while B was closing a multi-million-dollar merger, Cassia came crying to my office. Her little dirt-digging hobby was bankrupt. Her fiancé, smart man David, wherever he is, had realized the ship was sinking and bailed, leaving her with nothing. The laughter in the room instantly died. The silence that followed was so absolute, so suffocating, that I could hear the ocean waves crashing against the cliffs a mile away. People were staring at me. Some had their mouths literally open in shock. Aunt Caroline gasped and covered her mouth. Beatrice was staring at the table, refusing to make eye contact with me, her face flushed red. Liam just looked confused. "She begged me for a bailout," my father said, his voice booming in the dead quiet of the pavilion. $50,000. She cried, she pleaded. But I am a businessman, and as a father, I had to teach her a hard lesson about the real world. I told her no. I told her that she was a failure of her own making, and that my legacy would be protected. He paused, letting the humiliation settle over me like a suffocating blanket. So, tonight, as I celebrate Beatrice, the daughter who earned her place, I also raise a glass to Cassia. Because without Cassia's absolute failure, we wouldn't be able to appreciate Beatrice's perfection quite as much. To the bride and groom, he raised his glass. No one drank. No one clapped. The room was paralyzed by the sheer, unadulterated cruelty of what had just occurred. I stood there for what felt like an eternity. My vision swam. I felt stripped naked. Every private agony and struggle I had endured over the last year, weaponized and broadcasted to hundreds of elite strangers. I looked at my father. He was smiling at me, a cold, victorious, dead-eyed smile. He had finally put me in my place permanently. I didn't cry. The shock was too profound for tears. I calmly reached down, picked up my small clutch purse from the table, and pushed my chair in. The scrape of the wooden chair legs against the floor sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. I turned and walked away from the head table. I walked down the center aisle of the pavilion, past the staring faces of senators, CEOs, and distant cousins. I kept my spine straight and my chin high. I didn't look back. I walked out of the pavilion, across the manicured lawn, and down the long, winding driveway of the Sterling estate. I walked until my feet bled in my heels, and then I took them off and walked barefoot. I ordered a rideshare from the main road, went to my hotel, packed my bags, and was on a flight back to New York by 6 a.m. For 2 months, I didn't hear a single word from my family. Not an apology from my father. Not a text from Beatrice asking if I was okay. Nothing. I was a ghost. I mourned the death of my family, buried myself in my work with Silas, and tried to rebuild my shattered dignity. I thought that was the end of the story. I thought I would never speak to them again. But 2 months later, on a random Tuesday morning, my phone started vibrating on my desk. And it didn't stop. It was a Tuesday morning, precisely 62 days after the wedding. I was knee-deep in a marshland restoration project just outside of Ithaca, my boots coated in thick grey mud. The morning was quiet, save for the calls of red-winged blackbirds and the rhythmic sloshing of my business partner dragging a tarp full of invasive phragmites toward our truck. Then my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number from a Manhattan area code. I ignored it. 5 seconds later, it buzzed again. Then again. Within 3 minutes, I had 7 missed calls, 4 voicemails, and a barrage of text messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Wiping my muddy hands on my canvas overalls, I finally answered a call from a number ending in a 00. "Hello?" I asked, my voice rough from a morning of yelling over the wind. "Is this the owner of the ecological landscaping firm mentioned at the Newport Estate wedding?" A sharp, professional woman's voice demanded. "This is Gwendolyn Ross from the Wall Street Financial Chronicle." I froze. My stomach plummeted, the familiar icy dread from that terrible night rushing back into my veins. "How did you get this number? I have no comment on anything regarding my family." "I'm not calling about the family drama, sweetie," Gwendolyn said, her tone softening just a fraction, hinting at a chaotic energy on her end of the line. "I'm calling about the fraud, and the video." "What video? You haven't seen it?" She sounded genuinely shocked. "A caterer at the reception recorded your father's entire speech. They posted it on TikTok last night with the caption, 'Billionaire destroys his own daughter at a wedding.' It has 14 million views. The internet is actively hunting for you right now to offer support. But that's the small news. The big news is the audit." I leaned against the side of my muddy truck, my knees suddenly weak. "Audit? The groom's family," Gwendolyn explained, her words clipping together at a rapid-fire pace. "The private equity firm. The governor was sitting at their table during that speech, remember? When your father mocked you for asking for a $50,000 loan, the groom's father got suspicious. He thought, why would a man worth 9 figures publicly humiliate his child over a measly 50 grand instead of just quietly saying no? It didn't track with the behavior of a liquid billionaire." My breath hitched. My father was obsessed with appearances. He bought bespoke suits and imported cars, yet he always seemed to scream at his accountants behind closed doors. So, the groom's family quietly hired private forensic investigators before legally merging their trusts with your sisters, the journalist continued. They found a massive, cavernous black hole, shell companies in the Caymans, embezzled client funds from his real estate escrows. Your father didn't deny you that loan to teach you a lesson in accountability. He denied it because he literally didn't have $50,000 in liquid cash. His entire empire is a Ponzi scheme built on leverage and theft. The FBI raided his Manhattan offices an hour ago. The phone slipped from my ear. The world tilted on its axis. The man who had stood on a stage and destroyed my dignity to elevate his own ego was completely, fundamentally bankrupt. The cruelty wasn't just malice, it was a desperate, psychological projection to mask his own catastrophic failures. By noon, the news had officially broken on every major network. The viral video of the wedding speech had acted as the catalyst, drawing millions of angry, sympathetic eyes to my story. My small company's website crashed from the sheer volume of traffic. Thousands of people were trying to hire us, donate to us, or just send messages of solidarity. But the hardest karma was reserved for my sister. Because she was a junior partner at the corporate law firm that handled our father's contracts, the authorities immediately suspended her license, pending an investigation into whether she had knowingly facilitated the shell corporations. The groom's family, utterly terrified of the scandal and the financial liability, filed for an immediate, aggressive annulment. In the span of 24 hours, the golden child and the aristocratic patriarch lost their wealth, their reputations, and their freedom. Amidst the absolute chaos, I received a visitor. I was sitting in my cramped, soil-scented office behind the greenhouse when a sleek, black town car pulled into our gravel driveway. A man stepped out. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit that looked like armor, with piercing, intelligent dark eyes and a jawline that looked like it could cut glass. He moved with a quiet, commanding authority that immediately made the chaotic room feel incredibly small. He walked into my office, pulled a leather briefcase from his shoulder, and placed a business card on my cluttered desk. Maxwell O'Connor, managing partner O'Connor and Associates. I represent the forensic auditing team hired by the groom's family, Maxwell said, his voice a deep, gravelly baritone that sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. But as of this morning, I am stepping down from their retainer to offer my services strictly to you. Pro bono. Why? I asked, suspicious, crossing my arms over my muddy overalls. Maxwell leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that was deeply unsettling, yet strangely protective. Because in untangling your father's web of fraud, I found something else. He didn't just steal from his clients. 15 years ago, he forged documents to completely drain the trust fund your late mother left explicitly in your name. He stole millions from you, and I am going to help you burn his kingdom to the ground to get it back. For the next 3 weeks, Maxwell O'Connor became a permanent fixture in my fractured reality. He was a force of nature, ruthless in the courtroom, brilliant in his forensic analysis, and fiercely, overwhelmingly protective of me. As the media circus surrounding my father's catastrophic downfall reached a fever pitch, Maxwell became my human shield. When paparazzi swarmed the perimeter of my greenhouse, trampling my carefully cultivated hydrangeas, it was Maxwell who stood on the gravel driveway, his broad shoulders blocking the lenses, while he coolly threatened them with immediate trespassing injunctions. We spent our nights barricaded in my cramped, soil-scented office, the air thick with the smell of black coffee and damp earth. We pored over boxes of decades-old financial documents, tracing the labyrinthine shell companies my father had used to siphon away my late mother's trust. In those quiet, exhausted hours, sitting cross-legged on my office floor with a box of cold takeout between us, the rigid, imposing lawyer began to soften. He would loosen his perfectly knotted silk tie, roll up his sleeves, and listen to me talk about root systems and soil ecology with genuine fascination. A deep, undeniable connection sparked in the quiet spaces between the chaos, a silent, steady anchor in the storm my family had become. But the final, agonizing act of this tragedy hadn't yet played out. It happened on a miserably cold, rainy Thursday evening. The sky had turned a bruised purple by late afternoon, unleashing a torrential downpour that hammered against the glass panes of the main greenhouse. Maxwell had just stepped out to my truck to take a secure, confidential call with the district attorney regarding the frozen assets. I was alone, finding solace in the rhythmic, mindless work of misting a row of rare, delicate maidenhair ferns. The heavy humidity inside was a comfort, wrapping around me like a warm blanket. Then, the heavy iron hinges of the greenhouse door shrieked. I turned around, the spray bottle slipping from my damp fingers, and gasped. Standing in the doorway, soaked to the bone and shivering, was my father. The silver-haired, impeccably tailored titan of industry who had commanded the room at the Newport estate was entirely gone. In his place stood a hollowed-out ghost. His clothes, a wrinkled trench coat over a stained dress shirt, smelled faintly of stale alcohol and damp wool. The skin around his jaw sagged, grey and pallid, and his eyes darted frantically around the shadows of the greenhouse like a cornered animal. "They froze everything," he rasped. His voice lacked the booming, theatrical resonance he had weaponized against me at the wedding. It was reedy, thin, and desperate. He took a heavy step into the humid heat of the greenhouse, his wet shoes squelching on the concrete floor. My offshore accounts, the townhouse. They even confiscated my passport, for God's sake. I took a slow, deliberate step back, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "You shouldn't be here. The terms of your bail explicitly forbid you from contacting witnesses in the federal trust fraud case. If anyone sees you—" "Witnesses! You're my daughter!" he exploded, a sudden, terrifying flash of his old temper surfacing. He closed the distance between us in 3 long strides, grabbing the edge of my wooden potting table. I raised you. I clothed you. I put a roof over your head. And now you're letting that absolute shark O'Connor tear my life apart. You need to call him off right now. You need to drop the civil suit regarding your mother's trust, or they are going to lock me away for the rest of my life. You stole from me, I said. My voice was eerily calm, cutting through the heavy sound of the rain. You forged documents to steal the money Mom left specifically for my future. And then you had the audacity to stand in front of 300 elite guests and mock me for being broke. You broke me for sport, Dad. I was protecting the family name, he shouted, his face twisting into an ugly, unrecognizable mask of rage. He slapped his hand violently against the table, sending a heavy terracotta pot crashing to the floor, where it shattered into a dozen pieces. I had to keep the business afloat. If I had gone under, we all would have lost everything. No, you would have lost your country club membership and your precious ego, I shot back, the years of suppressed agony and humiliation finally erupting. You never cared about this family. If you did, you wouldn't have manipulated my sister into marrying a man she didn't love just to secure a backdoor bailout. You ruined her life, too. Her husband left her. She's facing disbarment because of your shell companies. You destroyed your own golden child because you were too much of a coward to admit you were a failure. He opened his mouth to scream at me, his fists clenched tight at his sides, taking a menacing step toward me. But before the sound could even leave his throat, the greenhouse door slammed open with the force of a thunderclap. Maxwell strode in, bringing the freezing rain and the furious wind with him. His dark eyes instantly locked onto my father, and the temperature in the room seemed to plummet. He moved with a terrifying, predatory grace, stepping smoothly between me and my father, his broad back shielding me entirely. "Robert," Maxwell said, his voice a low, lethal vibration that commanded absolute obedience. "You are in direct violation of the conditions of your release. If you do not leave this property in exactly 3 seconds, I will personally drag you out into the mud by your collar, and I will call the district attorney to have your bail revoked before you even hit the pavement." My father glared at Maxwell, his chest heaving with exertion and fury. He looked past the lawyer's imposing shoulder, trying to meet my eyes one last time. He was searching for the submissive, easily intimidated girl he had bullied for 30 years. He didn't find her. I stared back at him, unflinching, anchored by the cold, hard truth and the unwavering strength of the man standing protectively in front of me. My father's shoulders slumped, the fight completely drained out of him, leaving nothing but an empty, pathetic shell. Without another word, he turned and shuffled out into the pouring rain, a broken man walking toward an inevitable prison sentence. 2 days later, unable to escape the mountain of forensic evidence Maxwell had compiled, my father officially pleaded guilty to multiple counts of wire fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. His sprawling, opulent Newport estate was seized by the federal government and auctioned off to pay restitution to the hundreds of clients he had defrauded. As for me, the viral video fundamentally altered the trajectory of my life. The massive influx of public support allowed my ecological landscaping firm to secure municipal contracts across the entire state. The millions that Maxwell successfully recovered from my mother's stolen trust didn't go toward designer clothes or sports cars. It fully funded a new foundation dedicated to reviving endangered wetlands. And Maxwell? He never left. The fierce, uncompromising lawyer who had torn down my father's fraudulent empire ended up building a beautiful, quiet life with me, proving that sometimes the most magnificent things grow in the soil left behind by total destruction. Karma rarely acts immediately, but when it arrives, it demands to be felt. My father's cruel microphone drop didn't destroy me. It exposed his own fraudulent life, paving the way for my unexpected triumph and real love.